when you have the goal in mind, it can feel tedious. And I had this problem for years of, I would, by the end of a project, be loathing it because I just want to move the fuck on. I don't want to be thinking about Blitz the League anymore. I don't want to talk about Shadow Ops anymore, or GoldenEye, or whatever the subject might be. And one of the things that kind of changed in the last while is respecting that process that you go through, that itself is something to enjoy. Building the blocks, instead of going into a project and only seeing the final pristine version, respecting the enjoyment that you get in putting things together piece by piece, because it is a necessity. Yeah, sure, someone's going to say AI, but like, no, in the real world, the actual, process is you have to go through these things. And, I'm not a top level editor. If I had my way, I would absolutely hand it off to somebody else, but I can't do that. And the only other alternative is to not make the video at all. So I learned editing and I go through it. And that's the kind of thing that's not a problem. That's something to, indulge. Like I said earlier, this stuff is a privilege. Being able to do this stuff is being able to make videos for a living and be able to talk to, whatever the challenges might be. I only had one other job before. It was definitely worse. Maybe there's some fringe benefits here and there. It was definitely worse, unquestionably.
Yeah, it's the same like with this podcast, though. It's no one's getting rich doing it, but it's an absolute pleasure being able to do it, talking to the people that we get to talk to. People that you'd been subscribed to for God knows how many years.
I would have loved to have talked to the head of Arcane. Like, what the fuck? That was something I would have done for 2 or 3 hours.
Deadforge sorted us out because, as I mentioned before, Raph had been on his show as well. Shout out to the Gaming Bounty Board podcast. Mm-hmm. And he got him back on board as well. And I shit a brick. I'm like, we're talking with all the big YouTubers and the Boomer Shooter publishers and stuff, and then suddenly Raphael Contoli is on the show, and I'm like, I was literally pacing around this room, nervous, before we recorded that. I checked the script like 15 times, just to make sure that it was 100% professional, and there wasn't a dick joke in there, which, usually there's something in there like that.
Yeah, because he would never make those.
Yeah, he was such a cool guy.
My original discussion with him was only like 12 minutes long or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the very first developer that I'd ever talked to.
Wow.
And it was the first time when I was like, holy shit, this is like a dream come true kind of moment. And I mean, you talk about nervous. I mean, I think you could even watch the interview and see kind of how nervous I was. And I even like wrote down like all these different questions because I only had like 10 minutes. And I've said plenty of times before, I mean, I took Raph's advice from a post that he made on Twitter about how to go about talking to game developers. Mm-hmm. And it was I think, to just, I don't remember exactly how it went, but he said something along the lines of, if you're going to approach someone like a game developer or so on, you got to understand that they have limited time like you have limited time. So, it was like, hey, if you have a spare 10 minutes or, a spare few minutes, and if you're willing to give that to me, that kind of thing. And that's basically what I did. Because I think I couldn't even directly message him. I had to like tag him in a post on Twitter that he just so happened to see, and then it went from there. And that was cool. I've done that a few times now, and that's always a privilege.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong in asking. And the other thing that I learned from this too was, when I was working on GoldenEye Rogue Agent, when I was doing that video, I had reached out to several different developers at all levels. I reached out to designers and I reached out to artists and all that kind of stuff, and wasn't getting anything back. And when I, sort of put the email through to go to Danny Bilson, who was a writer on that game, who then, later on became the CEO of THQ and all these other big things and is a Hollywood screenwriter, you don't think, oh, that guy is going to be the one that replies to you. But the thing that you learn in that environment is that, Danny, as a result of his work and as a result of working, I believe when I I don't know if this is still the case, but I'm pretty certain he was working at a university at the time that I contacted him. Because of that, he was the one who had a secretary. He was the one who had an assistant, somebody to get through the emails. So, I got the reply back within a day or two and saying, hey, he has half an hour on this day. Do you want to set that up? So, a definite, if there's a piece of advice I could ever give to anybody that's going into this, is that don't hesitate to talk to big names because you think that, you're such small fry, they're not going to respond to you, because that big status is in many ways the reason that they might have more free time than a lesser known developer. And then also that, these people are big names to you or me. At the end of the day, they're just people. They go to, game developers don't get pulled over aside typically when they go to a Starbucks. They're not, being harassed on a train or thing like that. Most of their challenge is spent, in game engines and in tech and all that kind of stuff. It's not really in sort of the public sector. So, these people are celebrities to you or me, but they're not going to be as sort of swamped as you would expect.
Yeah, I think a good piece of advice for just doing any of what we do at all, I mean, whether it's this podcast or making our videos or getting developers involved or even other creators, no matter how big or how small they may be, every single one of them are all human. So it doesn't matter how famous they may be, or whether it's just the niche of gaming or it's film or whatever it may be, because like you said, their popularity, their fame level, their celebrity status is very much just towards that one group. Because if there's somebody out there who just doesn't watch movies, they might not know who any of these directors are that you think are almost impossible to talk to, or whatever. Same with game developers. I could probably go to work tomorrow and ask 10 people who Rafael Colantonio is, and probably none of them will even know who he is. Maybe one person. And that would be a stretch, I feel like. So I think the best advice is just always just shoot your shot. Take a chance, because they're human
Worst
too.
they can say is no.
So there's a possibility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Worst they can say is no. And unless, you are, for some reason wanting to date them, it's not going to be that devastating. It's a thing of, it's a kind of another thing sort of to that is that the industry is hysterically small. One of the things that I realized when talking to a developer who was attached to Metro, I got to talk to two of the developers on Metro Exodus, and they were fantastic in terms of giving out details.
Great video, by the way.
Thank you. I don't like that one, but
really.
But when I was talking to the developers on that, one of the things that one of the devs described to me is that he said, if you were to ask me to go and get in contact with this other person, I might not know them, but he's worked in the industry long enough at this point that he probably knows somebody who knows that other person. The amount of crossover at studios, the amount of transfers, the amount of people going all over the world, like this developer from, originally working at, for a Malta, originally working in Malta, and then ended up at Ubisoft Toronto, like on the other side of the world. And then, can I tell this story? I'll tell you this story later, just in case I can't off the air. But it's not like anything terrible. It's mostly just like, I'm not sure if the other people gave like an NDA or whatever. But the point is that the way I can generalize it is that it's a very sweet story about, here's these two people who think they're going in different directions in the industry, and then within a couple of months run right back into each other again. Because, it is kind of amazing how small it is. And depending on the genre, the smaller and smaller it gets. Something like an FPS genre might be big right now and have a lot of people. But if you get to the niche subgenres, it sometimes goes to like single individuals in terms of people who know how to make this jump feel perfect, or how to make this gun feel satisfying, or whatever, the feature might be.
Yeah.